And we're recording too.
Thank you. Oh, wow. It's 4:57. Time flies when you're having fun. Jason, would you mind sending Eric a link to the meeting, or somebody send it to him? He is driving back from a field thing. He's going to try to access by phone.
Just sent.
Jason, do you want me to send it? It's Doreen.
We sent it, Doreen.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it's 5 o'clock and we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This meeting is being held in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act and is open to the media and public. Notices were duly posted and the meeting was advertised in the Hunterdon County Democrat and Courier News. Formal action may be taken. Can I get a roll call, please?
Dr. Cerciello.
Here.
Mr. Emmons. Mrs. Fiore.
Here.
Mrs. Flores.
Here.
Mrs. Zagorski.
Here.
Mr. Wallace.
Here.
Mr. Sperling. Mrs. Sample. Mrs. Simon.
Here.
3 are absent.
Can we stand for the flag salute, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Simon. To start my superintendent's report tonight, we're joined by Mr. Tumalo, our supervisor of SEL, and he's going to share with the board the HIB self-assessment. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Tumalo.
Hi, everyone. How are you? Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Just let me know when you can see it. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, it sounds like there's a little echo on my end. Okay. Okay. Dr. Hart, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm going to share our HIB self-assessment results from this past year. But before I share the results, I'm just going to give a quick overview about the process for determining and submitting our scores. The school climate team, which is led by our school counselors, they complete the self-assessment together. Once the assessment is completed, they share the results with me, and we kind of discuss them together. The data is compiled, and then we present to the board for approval once the principals and the anti-bullying specialists have agreed on the results. Then the self-assessment results are entered into the NJ DOE website for final submission. So our school assessment results for this year are as follows. The total possible score is a 78. So we did very well, as you can see. Three Bridges, White House, and Reddington all scored the top score, and Hollenbrook scored themselves as a 77, which there's one area they felt they could do, they could improve upon next year. So there are 8 core elements on the rubric for scoring. As follows. There's different categories, and within those categories, there are particular indicators, and there's a total of 26 indicators in those areas that we look at. The grades are as follows. So we score on a 1, 2, 3 scale. 3 is exceeding requirements, 2 meets all requirements, and a 1 is partially meeting the requirements. So I just wanted to highlight that the highest score that we can get is a 78. However, if we reported meeting all requirements as a 2, the final score would be a 52. So you can see we exceeded those requirements by a large margin. So from our results, we kind of found that our areas of strength from this year are in core element 1, 2, and 4. We found that we did really well with our HIB programs and our approaches. Our HIB training on policy and procedures was an area from last year that we definitely improved upon this year. And then core area 4, which is curriculum and instruction on HIB and other related information. Some areas to improve upon for next year so of course we're going to continue to improve upon core elements 1, 2, and 4. Within core element 2, something that we're going to look at is providing HIB training for contracted service providers and volunteers. That was the one area that Hollenbrook felt that we could do better on. So that's an area that we're going to look at for next year. And then the final thing I wanted to share with you is our timeline for submission to the DOE. So once the self-assessment scores for each building is compiled, We have a deadline of December 2021 to submit all of the information onto the website. And then once that is entered, I will certify the results for our state of assurances, and then we wait for the state to generate an official report for us to post on the district website. So I know that that was rather quick, but does anyone have any questions or anything that they'd like to discuss further?
Mr. Tumalo, I would just like to say thank you for the presentation, and I would say kudos because I think that's the highest score we've ever received. So
I know.
Good job.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tumalo.
Sure, Dr. Hart. Thank you, everybody.
If there are no other questions, the only other thing, Mrs. Simon, I had on my superintendent's report is to notify the board that last year around reorg time when we adopted our board calendar, it was prior to us developing the school calendar, which included an additional professional development day. So October 12th, we have a Board of Education meeting that day, which is also the same day that we have a teacher in service day. So the board office is open, teachers are here, but students are not here because it's a teacher in service day. I wanted to just get a straw poll of the board to ensure that we'll have enough board members for that meeting because students are not here. I know that families sometimes like to go on vacation or take a long weekend somewhere. And I want to ensure that our board meeting doesn't conflict with that long weekend. So I just want to present to the board, will October 12th, 2021 still work for our board meeting? Or would we have a preference to move it to either the Tuesday before or the Tuesday after? So I'll open for any concerns that you may have about that meeting date and if it might need to be adjusted. If there are no concerns, we can keep it as is.
Since you're not hearing a response, might I recommend that the board members email you after they check their calendars and hopefully by the end of this week? Would that work?
We've got plenty of time, but I just want to draw your attention to it and let you know that everybody should check their calendars and see if there's any conflicts for that day. If there are, we have plenty of time to move the meeting. So if anything develops over the next month or so, we can re-advertise the meeting and change it. So certainly just email me. And Mrs. Simon, that's all I have right now. I'll just let the board know that, you know, as I emailed you, the road forward, which is our reopening plan guidance from the state, has come out. The administrative team, as well as the members of the association, have begun making plans to employ recommendations for the 21-22 school year. So we are working on that and more to come at a later date. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you so much. We're going to move into the next section, which is a public hearing on the proposed renegotiation and amendment to the employment agreement with the superintendent. Whereas the Arlington Township School District Board of Education, and after the board, wishes to amend the contract with the superintendent for the effective period of July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2023, and pursuant to NJSA 11-11, the board is required to provide public notice 30 days and 10 days prior of its intent to hold a public hearing and take action to amend, extend, negotiate, and/or alter contract terms and conditions of the superintendent. Notice was provided to the public via publication in the district's official newspaper on June 19th, 2021, and on July 10th, 2021. And a publication on the district's public website every day for the period beginning June 19th, 2021 through July 20th, 2021. The subject contract was reviewed and subsequently approved on the June 24, 2021 by the interim county executive superintendent and the New Jersey Department of Education Hunterdon County office. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the board is providing opportunity for public comment on the amended contract of the superintendent. The board, pursuant to NJSA 10-4-12B, Open Public Meetings Act, shall not publicly discuss personnel matters and shall not respond to comments made by members of the public. Please be aware that the subject of this hearing retain the right to privacy and shall retain all rights regarding defamation and slander according to the laws of New Jersey. The board shall not be held liable for comments made by members of the public. In a moment, we will open comment time to the public for limited to action items on the agenda. But before I do that, I would like to read an additional statement. Tonight, the Board of Education is approving a new 5-year contract for our Superintendent, Dr. Hart. This new contract will expire June 30th, 2026. This new contract coincides with our new 5-year strategic plan. This shows the confidence in Dr. Hart to continue the great work in DC and to remain focused on the important tasks at hand. When Dr. Hart came to this district, he created an open and inviting atmosphere. He has maintained an open door policy to parents, staff, and stakeholders. He has created an atmosphere in the district that is positive and encouraging to the staff and students. With his child-first thought process, he had helped navigate the district through the pandemic while helping to keep students and staff safe and comfortable to return to school. If we look at the new contract with a financial lens, the 2% increase per year will keep the district costs down, considering the statewide 2% tax levy cap, which remains in effect. Over the next 2 years, we are saving the district approximately $9,400. We are very excited for the great things to happen over the next 5 years. And personally, we're very thankful that you're going to stay on. So if any other board members would like to say something before we open up to public comment, feel free. Not to put you on the spot.
No, I just add, Laura, that thank you for that, for what you read about Dr. Hart. And this was an easy decision because Dr. Hart is fantastic, and we're very lucky to have him. So I think this contract really represents the right move for the district.
Thank you.
Really just want to echo that and just say directly to Dr. Hart, congratulations.
Eric, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm on the phone, so I'm just not sure whether I've never done this before by phone. I did want to voice my strong support for Dr. Hart's new contract. I think that the district is very lucky to have such a dedicated, incredibly competent professional who has exceeded all of our expectations. And Reddington the future is bright with him at the helm, and very, very happy that he has agreed to the 5-year extension. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Would anyone else like to say anything?
Just real quick, I echo all the sentiments of everyone involved with this process. I definitely feel Dr. Hart is a very huge asset to our district, and I'm glad we're going to be able to keep him for a few more years.
All right. Not hearing anything else, we'll open to the public, limited to the action items on this agenda. Are there any comments?
There is one comment from Alyssa Bulow. She said, yay, we are so blessed to have Dr. Hart. Thank you, Board of Ed, for your thoughtfulness and smarts.
Thank you. All righty. If there are any other comments regarding action items on the agenda, don't forget there'll be another time at the end of the agenda for public comment time. All righty. But we'll move into the rest of the agenda. For correspondence, we had 7 correspondents since our last meeting. Various topics regarding last day of school, graduation, and masks. Moving on to approval of the administrative reports. Can I get a motion to adopt 1.01 to 1.03, please?
So moved, Beth.
Second, Camille.
Thank you. Are there any questions on those items? Not hearing any. Can I get a roll call, please?
Dr. Cerciello,
Yes.
Mr. Emmons,
Yes.
Mrs. Fiore,
Yes.
Mrs. Flores,
Yes.
Mrs. Podgorski,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Mr. Zwirling,
Yes.
Mrs. Hample, Mrs. Simon.
Yes.
Passes.
Moving on to the minutes. Can I get a motion to adopt 2.01 to 2.04, please?
So moved, Tom.
Is there a second?
Second, Camille.
Thank you. Are there any changes required for the minutes? Not hearing any. Can I get a roll call, please?
Dr. Cerciello,
Yes.
Mr. Emmons,
Yes.
Mrs. Fiore,
Yes.
Mrs. Flores,
Yes.
Mrs. Podgorski,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Mr. Zwirling,
Yes.
Mrs. Simon.
Yes.
Passes.
Moving on to finance and facilities. Can I get a motion to adopt 3.01 through 3.11?
So moved, Tom.
Second, Beth.
Thank you. We had a report.
Yes, the Finance Committee met on July 8th, and we began with a presentation from Lee Nessel, who is the our insurance broker representing the School Alliance Insurance Fund renewal. Excuse me, this was the general liability insurance discussion that we had regarding our 7.9% increase in premiums that were due to the cost of cyber liability coverage, as well as events throughout the country. We're in year 2 of a 3-year commitment. We then discussed capital projects beginning with the Hollenbrook roofing project, which is on schedule, moving along very well. The student areas are going to be completed first in case of the supply chain issues. And we are, as of now, we're very pleased with our architect. We also talked about the RMS bleachers replacement. The old bleachers have been removed and the new bleachers are to be installed in September. We discussed other maintenance and IT projects, including flooring work, painting the stairwells and sidewalk repairs at White House School, patched wall at Hollenbrook School, a painted music room at Bridges School. The lockers are being painted at the middle school, and several trees are being removed, as well as painting our office hallways. We then talked about grants, starting with securing our Children's Future Bond Act of $78,551. The legislature has approved this project involving security film on windows. We also discussed the Emergency Connectivity Fund, which has a potential value of $164,000 approximately, to ensure that students have the ability to learn in remote setting if the students need to work from home on their Chromebook to continue their coursework. We also talked about the ESEA amounts, which vary due to enrollment fluctuations, including Title I through Title IV, as well as the IDA fund amounts that we get, the basic and the preschool amounts. We then talked about the food service breakfast program. An update is that the administration has met with principals, and there's been gradual progress towards full lunch offerings based on state requirements. So that's the plan for September. They're piloting a breakfast program this year as well, and breakfast will be available to students when they first enter the building. Machios continues to experience labor shortages. They currently have 6 employees. They're approximately 2 to 3 short. We will advertise to hopefully help fill the openings, and there'll be more updates closer to the start of school. We're also having the New Jersey Department of Labor audit is going to review our payroll practices, and the requested documents have been submitted. The annual standard audit is scheduled for the first week of August. This will include a federal audit due to the amount of federal money that we've received. We then talked about the finance agenda items and the bills list. And our next meeting is planned for Tuesday, August 17th. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the minutes that were read or the agenda items on the agenda?
Great.
Not hearing any. Can I get a roll call, please?
Dr. Cerciello,
Yes.
Mr. Emmons,
Yes.
Mrs. Fiore,
Yes.
Mrs. Flores,
Yes.
Mrs. Podborski,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Mr. Swirling,
Yes.
Mrs. Simon.
Yes.
Passes.
We have education technology. Can I get a motion to adopt 4.01 to 4.05, please?
So moved,
So moved,
Beth.
Tom.
I heard Beth first. No,
Tom,
we did
second.
not. Thank you. We did not have a report since our last meeting. Are there any questions on the agenda items? Not hearing any. Can I get a roll call, please?
Well, real quick, I have a question, Laura.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
403, does that
Yes.
fall under the guidance for the government's critical race training that they've been mandating?
Technically, that is associated. That is based on the statute, or I should say the legislation that was passed by Murphy.
Okay. And do we know what kind of training is going to come along with that yet? So we don't have the similar situation the high school ran into with the way training was presented?
Dr. Hart, would you like to handle that?
Yes, certainly. The training that we're offering under 4.03 is training for the leadership team and for a teacher leader from each building. And we purposely designed the training so that we as a leadership team and teacher designees from each building can view the presentation, do our own learning first, and then develop action plans for what is most appropriate and most timely as we roll it out to the full staff and to our students. So we're starting first with the leadership team and with one teacher designee from each building. Our goals for the training include to ensure that we adhere to our strategic goal under social awareness, which does include awareness of self and others, as well as acceptance of others and recognition of one's own self-awareness. Also does fall within line related to the new law that was passed back in, I want to say it was March of this year, that will soon mandate in schools the teaching of, and I don't have the exact language in front of me, but teaching of, tolerance and acceptance in all public schools, as well as discussion of unconscious bias and other related topics. I can bring up the language verbatim, but the idea is really to start with the leadership team so that we can really see what's most appropriate for us, for our community, and for our staff in order to move this work forward in a positive, productive direction. Does that answer your question? If you need more, let me
Yes,
know.
I just have a quick follow-up. Now, as far as our current SEL program that we've implemented a number of years ago, how much overlap is there between what we're already doing and what this potential training is going to be?
I think there's some overlap in terms of, first of all, our SEL program, which talks about social awareness, self-awareness, and relationship skill building and good decision-making. I think that there is also overlap in terms of some of the topics that we already have embedded into our social studies curriculum, like vestiges of slavery, the Amistad curriculum, or components of the Amistad curriculum, or commission, as well as Holocaust education. But I think given the current climate and the current situation, I think that teachers and students maybe approach the topics like this in the classroom because of the current events, and I think it'd be prudent to equip our teachers and our students with ways to have good, productive, positive discussions about these issues. But there is a ton of overlap already in SEL as well as social studies curriculum and language arts curriculum. We've also been incorporating, based off of last year's law, more contributions of the LGBTQ community in our curriculum and in our literature, as well as persons with disabilities into our curriculum and into our literature.
Great, thank you for the reply and the thorough explanation. There's been a number of comments and questions coming to me about this particular area, and you explained a lot to those who are online listening right now. Thank you.
Are there any other questions regarding the agenda items? Not hearing any. Can I get a roll call, please?
Dr. Cerciello.
Yes.
Mr. Emmons.
Yes.
Mrs. Fiore.
Yes.
Mrs. Flores.
Yes.
Mrs. Podgorski.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Zwirling.
Yes.
Mrs. Simon.
Yes. Moving on to personnel. Can I get a motion to adopt 5.01 to 5.17, please?
So moved, Camille.
Second time.
Thank you. We have a report.
Yes. So we met on July 8th, and we discussed staffing, enrollment projections, including enrollment with class sizes and enrollment for teacher assignments. We talked about the equity consultant follow-up, the purchasing specialist position, other personnel matters, and the agenda items for tonight: new hires, equity consultant, and purchasing specialist here. And we plan for our next meeting to be Monday, August 16th at 6 p.m.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Are there any questions on the minutes or the agenda items? Not hearing any. Can I get a roll call, please?
Dr. Cerciello.
Yes.
Mr. Emmons.
Yes.
Mrs. Fiore.
Yes.
Mrs. Flores.
Yes.
Mrs. Podgorski.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Zwirling.
Yes.
Mrs. Simon.
Yes.
Passes.
Communications. Can I get a motion to adopt 6.01 to 6.02, please?
So moved, Beth.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Camille.
Thank you. And we have a report.
Yes, we do. Just pulling it up. Hold on here. Okay, the Policy Communications Committee met on June 10th. We discussed the Policy Alert 223. The committee recommended the following policies for adoption: Bylaw 0131, Bylaws, Policies, and Regulations. As suggested by Strauss Esme, this bylaw will abolish a bylaw, policy, or regulation after it has been reviewed in committee and when statutes or codes change and the bylaw, policy, or regulation is no longer applicable, or when the bylaw, policy, or regulation is replaced with a new bylaw, policy, or regulation with a different policy number due to statutory or administrative code changes. We also discussed adopting policy 3142 and regulation 3142, non-renewal of non-tenured teaching staff members. The revision in this policy regulation is a change in language to clarify days to be calendar days. There are no revisions that affect the existing procedures regarding the non-renewal of non-tenured teaching staff members. This policy is mandated. We also recommended adopting policy 4146 and regulation 4146, non-renewal of non-tenured support staff members. The revision in this policy regulation is a change in language to clarify days to be calendar days. There are no revisions that affect the existing procedures regarding the non-renewal of non-tenured support staff members. This policy is also mandated. The committee discussed recommending to abolish policy 1649, Federal Families First Coronavirus COVID-19 Response Act. The Federal Families First Coronavirus Response Act was effective April 1st, 2020, and expired on December 31st, 2020. This federal law and policy guide 1649 provided extended federal family leave with pay and emergency paid sick leave for specific reasons related to COVID-19. The FFCRA has expired and employers are no longer required to comply with the provisions of the law. Family leave for purposes of childcare during a public health emergency is addressed in policy 1643. The committee also reviewed press release tentative topics. For July, the district will put out a summer reading and math activities press release. Then we brainstormed ideas and themes for the 2021-2022 school year. In addition to the topics that were suggested by Dr. Hart, Mrs. Fiore suggested highlighting the different departments within the school district, a State of the Union report for each area, and upcoming initiatives for each. Mr. Emmons suggested a focus on SEL in the November-December timeframe, and Mrs. Flores suggested highlighting partnerships with local entities and businesses. Other communications plans, community outreach brainstorming. The committee discussed ways to further reach the community with pertinent school information by creating a communication plan with key messaging and themes and utilizing social media. The next meeting is scheduled for August 3rd at 5 p.m.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions on the minutes or the agenda items? Not hearing any. Can I get a roll call, please?
Dr. Cerciello,
Yes.
Mr. Emmett,
Yes.
Mrs. Fiore,
Yes.
Mrs. Flores,
Yes.
Mrs. Podgorski,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Mrs. Rowling,
Yes.
Mrs. Simon,
Yes.
passes.
Moving into unfinished business. A reminder, the deadline for the school elections is July 26th. If you haven't already submitted, please do so. Those existing board members who wish to run again, and anybody new. If you can't find the information, you can always reach out to the business administrator, Mr. Bohm, and he would be able to direct you to where the application is. New business from the board. Oh, sorry. Is there anyone else that would like to bring up unfinished business?
Mrs. Simon, can you guys unmute?
We're trying to unmute. We were just trying to unmute, that's all. I'm sorry, we were muted. Before we move into new business from the board, I just want to thank the Board of Education for your very kind words for approving the superintendent contract. It's with great appreciation that I continue on here as the superintendent in Readington, and I look forward to 5 more years. So thank you very much. I just wanted to mention that before we move on any further, and I meant to mention other personnel, but I was muted. So thank you. Much gratitude.
Well, I think we all know that the district is in good hands. So thank you for continuing. We're very thankful to have you. Is there anyone that wants to bring anything else up on unfinished business? No? Okay. New business from the board. I'm going to recommend that we discuss the in-person board meetings before we turn to Judy. Yes? There was a brief discussion in the past about after this meeting being remote, how the board felt about moving the next meeting in August to in person.
I mean, I'll also just mention that there may be some guidance coming that may require that public entities return to in-person. Now that the public health emergency in New Jersey is over, there might be, I have not gotten any guidance yet, but I just want to let the board know that even if, right now we have the choice to make and we can talk about it further, but at some point we may get some guidance that says that public entities should return to in-person. And if that happens, then we'll want to do that. But until then, we can talk about August being in person, potentially for Judy Wilson's training. We can see how it goes tonight, and we could see if we feel like we want to do it in person as well, until we get such guidance. So I'll turn it over to you and the board. I was hoping to have it for tonight, but I have no guidance for you tonight. So.
Then I would recommend waiting until you get that guidance and then bring it before the board again, because I do believe that there's some resistance, because this has been very productive. And we do get a lot more participation, which is really nice. I mean, having been on the board for a considerable amount of time, usually only the public comes out when they're extremely unhappy about something. Fortunately, we haven't had any dress code debacles, and you have been managing things very well. So, but I enjoy seeing all of the people online. I'm glad they're participating, and they can send in their comments here. I would also like to say that I feel people are starting to embrace the idea of emailing the board and emailing you directly. I think a lot has to do with the way you respond to people so respectfully and so thoroughly, which kind of goes back to what I said earlier. You have made a huge change in this district, so I encourage the public to continue reaching out when they have questions or concerns. It really is important to have that line of communication open. It's both ways. I mean, we try to get the information out, but we also want to hear from parents, the public, and we also enjoy seeing the kids too. So, but so until my vote would be until you have to, I would stay the course, but that's me.
I just have a question. So if we did return to in-person, we would not have any remote kind of this live Google Meet option? It would be one or the other. Is that right?
That's why Jason and I have been piloting how we can best approach in-person board meetings that could be hybrid, virtual as well. Recall that prior to the pandemic, we would use our YouTube page, and members of the public would be able to type in comments. So one option is to go back to our YouTube videos where we would live stream our board meetings and members of the public can type comments, or they could submit comments to Jason as our business administrator in advance of the meeting. Option number 2 would be for all of us to be here in person, like Jason and I are here in person, and continue to do the Google Meet format. The reason why we're trying the microphone the way we have it is because Google Meet, unlike YouTube, allows for a back and forth verbal discussion over the computer. So the only change between YouTube, which is option 1, and Google Meet, which is option 2, is Google Meet allows for members of the public to speak aloud to the board over the speaker system that we have, whereas YouTube only allows it to be typed, to my knowledge. So those are our 2 options. Either way, Mrs. Fiore, we've always live streamed since I've been here, we've always live streamed our board meetings, and we can continue that, whether it's Google or YouTube, we can continue doing that, even if we do return in person, to make it more of a hybrid model.
Yeah, I would just like to add that it would be fantastic as board members if we couldn't physically be there for some reason, we could still participate in the board meeting, if we were home quarantining or whatever the case may be, but still be able to participate from afar. That would be fantastic.
Well, This is Eric. I'd like to second that as well. I've been teaching a course in New York City, and this entire time on this call, I've been on Canal Street trying to get into the Holland Tunnel. I would not have been able to participate in this meeting were it not for the format they had. I wanted to be able to congratulate Dr. Hart and the district in his contract. But if we go to a format where board members cannot contribute remotely, this would not have been possible.
So hearing those thoughts, Mrs. Simon, what I'll do is, unless we get guidance that compels us back to in-person, we'll continue this format until such time that we have to move back in person, and I'll see if there's any updated guidance from our board attorney about how we should do our format meetings, and I will email the board should there be any change between now and August.
Curious, if you kept the format where everybody was in the room and you still had Google Meet, what would the feedback be like then?
I think the feedback meaning like the reverberating sound back and forth, I believe is coming from what happens is when a member of the public or all of you who are at home are speaking, it's coming through our speaker system in the ceiling, and the microphone that's in the center of the room right now is picking up the sound that's coming from your voice when you speak. That's why we're getting the feedback. Now, for some reason that didn't happen prior to us being at the Hollenbrook cafeteria, because we got it down to a pretty good science here where we weren't getting any feedback. I'm not sure why we're getting it tonight. But we can explore other options because it seems like, based off of Eric's comment, Mr. Zwirling's comment, it seems like there's a preference to continue Google Meet because that allows you to participate. If we did YouTube, we wouldn't be able to have board members participate virtually because it would be text, typing conversation. We'll look into it. But the sound is really coming from members of the public or board members who are giving a report from home at the sound ceiling, and the microphone is picking up and giving the feedback. So we'll have to figure that out. And you know what? Maybe if it's not going to work, maybe we have time to think of other alternative. If this is going to be more long term, then we'll think of something more long term alternative to get maybe a more sophisticated sound system into.
Okay. All righty. Is there any other new business from the board before we move on to the board member training?
If I could quickly, the conversation about board meetings and the format of them, how does that impact committee meetings?
Yeah. I personally think that committee meetings they're really good virtually. The only time, in the past, if you're looking at drawings for like the finance committee or something like that, but even then in the recent days, they were able to shrink things down so we could see them. So I don't see why committee meetings wouldn't continue virtually.
And it also gives us more flexibility if we want to continue with the committee meetings being virtual. That we can have them any time, right? So sometimes we have board members who come on that are more flexible in the evening hours, and we can then do an evening appointment for an hour for a committee meeting without having Jason and I stay in the office or everybody come to the office. So it does provide a little bit more flexibility. Should there ever be a time for a committee that we need to have you come in, we can always do that if we need to. I think the thing with board meetings is it's the public participation piece of the board meetings that we have to consider when it comes to board meetings. For example, someone who may not have access to the internet, Jason and I sit here, right, just in case someone does come and wants to participate in the meeting in person because they don't have a computer at home themselves. So we want to be able to offer something for everyone to be able to participate.
That works.
But I think committee meetings can continue. It's just us in committee meetings, so I think I like them. virtual.
Okay.
Me too. Thank you.
It's definitely more conducive when you're working. You know, you can squeeze things in here and there.
This is Eric. I'd also just like you to look into the legality in a public meeting. If we go back to in-person meetings, can somebody who is virtual vote? You know, I have no idea. Certainly under the format that we currently have, obviously they can vote. But if some people are in the room and some people are out of the room, what is the status of their vote, and does it count for a quorum? Does it really matter, et cetera? I just, you know, maybe that should be looked at.
That's probably what we're waiting for the attorney to get back to us on. You know. Okay, and just for clarification for the board members, the training, the board member training is in public session. We're not adjourning to exec. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that. So I think that's it for new business from the board. Now I have a procedural question. Normally we would go into the board member training, but do we want to do the open to the public for anything on or off the agenda before we do the training? Doesn't that make sense?
I think so.
Okay. All right.
I agree. I think so also.
All right. So then we will open comment time to the public for anything on or off the agenda. Are there any comments? No.
Laura, we did have an email comment that came through that was per bylaw 0164.6 that we would read out public comments that were submitted to the business administrator. So I do have one of those to read. This is from John Lucas, 111 Main Street. Greetings, board members and Reddington Township School District leadership. My daughter is a White House school student entering first grade in the fall. My wife and I were very excited to sign her up for summer enrichment as she loves art and STEM. We were disappointed and concerned when we received the summer enrichment letter yesterday with the masking protocols. I am an assistant principal and supervisor of nursing in a Somerset County school district. This by no means makes me an expert. However, I have engaged in the work of reviewing, interpreting, and applying CDC, NJDOH, and local health guidance throughout the school year and into the summer. Admittedly, NJDOH has been vague with their updated masking guidance in the road forward. However, it does reference following CDC guidance. As I'm sure you already know, CDC guidance calls for masking in schools for all unvaccinated students and staff. Indoors, mask use is recommended for people who are not fully vaccinated, including students, teachers, and staff. Children under 2 years of age should not wear a mask. Further, the American Academy of Pediatrics released a statement on Monday reiterating their stance that all staff and students wear masks. The AAP continues to recommend that all staff and students who are 2 years or older wear face masks unless medical or developmental conditions prohibit their use. I understand this is information you already have. I am inquiring as to what information was used to make the determination that masks are not mandated for unvaccinated staff and students during summer enrichment. While it may be done in order to provide families with a choice, we know that even if we send my daughter with a mask, she is at an increased risk of being exposed to COVID-19 due to others not masking. When it comes to public health, choice for some results in a lack of choice for those that want to send their children to school in an environment responding to science, CDC guidance, and pediatricians' guidance. I understand you're getting concerns from all angles. I know there are unmask the children movements from folks that are skeptical of the CDC, science, and doctors. In this concerned parent and fellow educator's opinion, it's our duty to follow the federal guidance and especially the science and our doctors. I greatly appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Mrs. Simon, I'll just let you know that I have, and Mr. Lucas, I've started to prepare a thorough draft of a response for you and for the board members to your email. So I will ensure that you get that in the next day or so. So thank you for your comment.
Great, thank you. Are there any other comments from the public?
I would like to say something.
Sure.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Tara Colby. Thank you so much for hosting the meeting. I am doing summer enrichment next week with my 2 children. I am very excited that it is an option for them to decide to wear a mask or not wear a mask. So I do want to thank you for the letter that you did send over. And I'm pleased that it is a choice, because I am very happy about how you decided to really go forward with making everything as safe as possible. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments? All righty. So then we will move into the board member training unless anyone has an objection. You have to move more. Did the lights go out? Okay. All righty. For those members of the public, we're going to be doing board member training for, I believe, 90 minutes. Is that the time period that I've been told? Okay. So if you want to stick around, stick around. Otherwise, have a great evening. All right. The floor is yours.
Well, people are dropping like flies. I can't imagine why. I'm watching the numbers of participants just go down. But good evening, everyone. And I'm Judy Wilson. I'm happy to meet a few new board members who were not present when I had the privilege of doing the work to serve your district in the search for Dr. Hart and also in the strategic planning facilitation. Reddington Township has been doing beautiful, beautiful work. And I echo congratulations on your renewal of Dr. Hart's contract. I serve a lot of districts in New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. And in doing so, you know, over all the years, I know, as you do, leadership and the steadiness of leadership, longevity when you have a great leader matter deeply. It's a beautiful combination, and they matter deeply to every aspect of the school district, but especially the core work of your teaching and learning for students. So it was a privilege just to hear your conversation and to see that as one of your action items this evening. So pleasure to meet board members who are newer to this conversation and to greet those with whom I've had the privilege of working over the recent years. I do want to say that this is a little bit different than other trainings that you might have participated in or were required to take as per your oath of office, and not different in that they are in any way from a deficit model. They're not. They're absolutely what you need to get, especially as a new board member, when you think about your definition of role and your public obligations and your legal requirements. We're just going to try to think beyond those today. They are absolutely foundational to your work, but we're going to try to think a little bit beyond those today in terms of great governance and leadership. I also, before we get into that kind of nitty gritty, a couple of things. As a member of the public in New Jersey, I have to say that gratitude runs deep. To be of service to your community, to volunteer all of the hours that you volunteer, to read all of the emails that you got in the last 18 months, to be at points of celebration, but gosh, when you're at points of controversy or difficult decision-making, it's just an extra word of gratitude for board service. You really do go above and beyond. And it was my privilege as I served in public schools for 37 years, and as I served as a superintendent for 19, I depended on my great boards and great board members and learned a lot from them and with them. So thank you very, very much. Probably the last thing you want to do this evening in the middle of July is think about another hour and a quarter of being on a virtual meeting. But I want to say that you are a great board because you come to the table with both an open mind and an open heart. And that's a critical combination every time you walk into a meeting, every time you walk into a discussion with one of your constituents, and certainly when you are in a public board meeting. And so for just another hour and a half, I'm going to ask you to stretch that open mind and open heart and think about board leadership at that 10,000-foot view. Think about great governance. Think about how you do function well as individuals in this role and collectively as a board. And most importantly, with that growth mindset, think about where you go from here as a board. You may or may not have new board members joining you in January. I guess that's to be determined by your filings next week and, of course, by the vote. But really think about, so what's next for us? How do we take another step, get better at the many roles that we're charged with as board members? We will work as a group this evening, but when we are together, either in person or virtually, whatever you decide in our second session, we will do some small group work as well. So, Dr. Hart, I'm going to share the screen, and if it doesn't, are you seeing my whole screen? No. Now?
It's coming, yes.
Okay. All right. Oh, is it looking dark? Are you okay? All right. So I'll only do this for a few moments. When we think about board governance, it really is the piece that can create chaos and turmoil and sideline the mission of the district, which is, of course, the growth for your children, the academic growth, the social and emotional growth, the support of your faculty and your support staff. Really great governance accelerates what can happen for those children and for your staff members as you move along. So together, inquire and inspire.
Judy, it's
Yeah.
Jonathan. I'm sorry. I just want to let you know, it looks like we're looking at a split screen of yours. There you go. That's perfect.
Okay, my second
Never
option.
mind.
Okay,
You're good.
my second
You're good.
option. Thanks. So, as you think about, how do we do this together? How do we inspire? How do we inquire? I'm always the reader. I am always the one turning to what's the literature, what's the research. And, as a board member, you've got those weekly newsletters and packets to read. You have your agendas to work through, your committee meetings. And sometimes it can be rare that you actually take a step outside of that to think about 2021, where are we with the expectations and criteria for great governance? And so I'm sharing these resources for two reasons. One, a lot of the things we will look at this evening and in our second session are based on this literature. And two, some of you are just insatiable readers and want to read a chapter or two, not necessarily all of these texts, but maybe there's a text, a chapter that you'd like to follow up on, an article you'd like to follow up on. So it's here for your reference. The Speed of Trust, Covey's work is decades old, has been guiding leaders in all types of organizations for many, many years. And of course, we know that without trust, great leadership doesn't exist. Patrick Lencioni's work I share with you because it does come from the corporate world. I really like his work on the healthy organization. And when you think about your organization, you want to be able to take a little measure of health, not just how we function, but what enables us to function well. I don't like the title of this next book, but some of the chapters are very, very good. How Not to Be a Terrible School Board Member. It's a little bit more practical and probably not as advanced or sophisticated as you would need. The flip side of that is Ram Charan's work, which is based on consulting that he does with Fortune 100 companies in countries across the world. And we're going to look at some of the information that he bases his board governance training on. Daniel Goleman's work, if Anthony Tumolo were still with us this evening, he would say, yes, a lot of the SEL work that you're doing in classrooms and with teachers is based on Goleman's work, emotional intelligence, social and emotional learning, right? The facets that are learnable when we talk about social and emotional skills. I like his work in board training because all of his work is about focus. And those of you who were with us when we worked on the strategic plan might recall that we used a lot of Goleman's work in considering why a district needs to have goals that are multi-year and few in number. The 5 dysfunctions of a team, again, Lencioni's work. And the last piece, the governance core. And I would say if there's any text that you might want to read a chapter or 2 from, it would be the governance core. This really is based in education, and it's based on Michael Fullen's work, primarily in Canada and the US, but also internationally. And it comes with a lot of deep research about high-functioning school boards for high-functioning schools. So I'm going to throw these 2 terms out, and I'm going to ask you each to share how you see the Reddington Township schools in light of these 2 terms. So if someone were to ask me what any leader does, leader of a nonprofit, leader of a school, leader of any board, corporate or otherwise, leader of a place of worship, leader of a club, you name it, neighborhood group, I say that great leaders build capacity and understand and activate quality control. So what do you do as a board member? You build capacity, every facet of the district. Build capacity for kids, build capacity for adults. And you keep your finger on the pulse of quality. How well are we doing in all of these aspects with which we're charged? So I'm going to ask you to now think about in what ways in the last months, and we're going to say like not particularly through the lens of COVID, but in general, in what ways have you as a board member thought about and acted and voted on recommendations for building capacity across the district or for enacting quality control? So just name a few, just not too many of us here. You can just call out, make sure you're unmuted. And let's start with building capacity. In what ways do you as a school board member take responsibility for building capacity? Or, you know, Dr. Hart, you're the 10th member of this team, so not excluding you in any of these discussions here. As a team, how is the work that you do, how does it directly build capacity?
Well, the only thing I can think of at the moment is obviously our support of professional development within the district. It's one of the nice things I think I've noticed about the district, right? I've been on the board since November, and just the support that there is for professional development, right? Paying individual teachers to prepare and to participate in. And so, you know, the focus then of that PD, of course, would be building capacity, their capabilities within the classroom and district.
It's a great example, right? The learning that our adults do. It's a great example. Other ways in which you build capacity or support the building of capacity?
What I have found, what I really am impressed with, I haven't been on the board long. It's nice to meet you.
Good to meet you also, Camille.
Is really leading by example. And that comes again from Dr. Hart. I'm not just saying it because he's here, but the things we said about him tonight, and he really does lead by example. And that's the way, in my opinion, how we're really building capacity and will continue to throughout the district, because everyone wants to, when you maintain high standards, starting with yourself, then everybody kind of wants to, jump on that ship and be part of a winning program.
A winning team, right? So building capacity by modeling and having people emulate or aspire. Other ways? If you were to take a typical school board agenda and think about where you devote dollars, actual resources, right? Where you devote time, how you build policy that enables people to advance their work, even in terms of your facilities, right? The facilities that are designed to promote new programs, to meet the needs of children, to change as your populations change, to change as your curriculum changes, right? All ways in which you are attending all of the time to the building of capacity. You don't want to leave your work after, Laura, how many years have you served?
11.
11, right? So whether it's 3, 11, or even more, you don't want to see, yeah, we're in the same place. It's all good. There's no chaos, right? Everybody's managing from day to day. No one's screaming about anything. You want to be able to say from time to time, over this period, this is how we have built capacity for people to learn, for people to grow together, both young and adult. What about quality control? What in your purview as a board member falls under quality control?
I think in terms of like policy committee, just my specific role, updating policies that are no longer, relevant and or removing them or just keeping an eye on the policy alerts and what's coming out and making sure that we are up to date.
Yeah. Thanks, Betsy. Think about alignment, right? Alignment of policy. Does it really match what we're doing and what we want to do 2021 and beyond? How else? Quality control.
One idea would be looking at your programs and making sure they're being taught across all the different levels. And like, for example, when we looked at our math program and streamlined everything, and making sure that the curriculum is being followed. And if there are changes that are needed within the curriculum. So that's the way I look at that.
Yeah. So curriculum alignment, like where are there gaps? How does it match our data? How's our data informing what we should do, right, in that quality control? Another?
Yeah, I would add to it. I mean, kind of what Laura was saying too. It's also the people then that are teaching that curriculum, right? So personnel.
Right. So you have an evaluation system in place, and you as a board only evaluate your superintendent, but you have a system in place, right? So that even beyond state regulations, you understand how people are getting feedback, right? A critical piece of quality control. And that's different than how people are being ranked or rated in a formal evaluation. So quality control with your superintendent, with each other, right? I'm going to say every great board thinks about controlling the quality of how you present, how you behave, right? How you communicate, right? So the quality control. You only evaluate your superintendent, of course, but you have a system in place for others. You're also thinking about quality control in terms of, oh my gosh, all the things that come in this breadth of responsibility you get reports on, literally air quality control, right? Quality control of how resources are spent and where money goes. Right? But in the end, building capacity and quality control, two very important lenses that if somebody really said to you, so what are the responsibilities of a board member? I would use those two phrases, right? Or else you could go on and on and on with this litany. And these lenses help you question your effectiveness and your work. You know, those nights when you're driving home from a board meeting and it's late and you're watching the deer all through Bennington Township and you're thinking, you know, where are we? Quality control and building capacity. In what ways are we really tackling this and not just going through the step by step by step rote pieces of an agenda? So it's easy for a board to do that, especially when no one's screaming. You know, when no one's sending multiple long and nasty emails. It's when things are smooth sailing. So I'm going to say when things are smooth, that's really a time to question and push forward with building capacity and quality control.
Hey, Judy.
Yeah.
Do we get feedback?
Do you?
I just want to add that, you know, one of the things you talked about with quality control, and I think that we really high functioning like this is the systems we have in place, not just about evaluation, but committee meetings where the board is updated, board meetings where there's a superintendent report, like there's those systems that we have in place of update and revisit and recycle. You know, things go through committee board sometimes, and I think that having systems really do help quality control. So building those systems and maintaining those systems in a way does keep good quality control, because there's a way I report to the board and then they can hear about assessment scores or climate scores or survey results and things, and those reporting systems are critical to quality control.
And they're great examples. And so you have systems, right? And we're going to hear that term and use it again and again today and in later times together, because you know, you'll hear people say a school system. Most time in New Jersey, we hear people say a school district. If you can substitute that and think often about what makes a great system work, right? How are all the gears meshing together? How does your decision about kindergarten matter to your middle school, right? How does your decision about transportation matter to how the day starts for a child, right? All of the interworkings of these gears meshing together and never being siloed. Right? So even though your public agendas are pretty much divided by either committee reports or section, business report, personnel report, never lose sight of the fact that you are guiding a system and all of these pieces have to interact and work together. So Sengi talks about the learning organization. And I'm going to say that you can have schools or you can have a district, but that does not mean that you have a learning organization. So another lens that would be really great once in a while for you to just sort of kick around in your brain, right? How are we a learning organization? Right? Not just how are we providing some hours of PD for teachers, but as an organization, how are we learning from our mistakes, our missteps, right? Because nothing will be perfect. How are we learning from the feedback we get from community? How are we learning from each other as board members? Because while you do come together to work as a team of 10, you do come, hopefully, with diverse thought, right? I always hope that people come with diversity of thought, but commonness of goodwill, right? That you're there for the greater good. You're there for all children, but you can approach things in different ways, add different ideas, have diversity of thought, not have to be lockstep in any way, and work really hard to come to a point where you're ready to move forward. So, are you a learning organization? That's a huge question. Or are you an organization that's just like taking care of business day to day? When there are challenges in front of you, what are you depending upon for your learning, for your information? So 2 questions, and I'd love to hear from all voices here on the board. The first is, what were you faced with in the last 2 years that you needed to learn? And how did you go about learning? You needed to learn something, it was new, and you had to have a method, an approach, a process. How did you approach a new learning as a board in the last 2 years? You had lots of challenges. A lot of challenges.
Well, I think as a board, over the last year alone, we had to learn to do all of these committee meetings and
Right?
board meetings through these digital medium, whether it's Zooms, whatever. And a lot of us who have kids also had to learn how to deal with getting our kids focused at home while being board members and hearing everything from everybody in the community, what they liked or didn't like about it.
A lot of learning and a lot of steep, quick learning through those two, of family, the changes that had to be made, and also you as a board functioning virtually with a lot more technology. What else have you had to really learn in order to be prepared? Jonathan's so tired of learning. I can tell you that he's like ready to have a break from this, but from regulations to CDC information, right, to how to better communicate in urgent situations. Lots and lots of learning. It's a good chance for you to be able to say, how did we do that well? And how did we perhaps do that in ways that, faced with our next major challenge, we can learn from? So you can anticipate from where we sit in the middle of July in 2021, you can anticipate some of the broad stroke challenges ahead of you. What do you think they'll be based on? What topics, themes, challenges can you reasonably expect you as a board will face in the next 12, 18 months? Just topics. I heard some of them during your meeting tonight.
I was going to say that, Judy, just everything around critical race theory and diversity, equity, inclusion, all of that. I mean, just everybody has mixed feelings about it. And critical race theory, are you taking something away from my child to create an opportunity for another child? Right? There's there's a lot. So,
and I don't know that there will be a board not engaged in that discussion in the next year and a half, probably within the next month. And I know that it's going to take learning, right? Before we have reactions, it's going to take learning, right? Not just in terms of research and information, but also approach. How will we approach? What other topics do you expect? They might be programmatic, they might be fiscal. What other topics for Reddington Township do you expect? Yeah, as a board, we know we're going to have to tackle this.
My internet cut out, so I didn't hear the first. Oh.
Go ahead, Beth.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't know what your first topic was that was put out there, but I was thinking like learning loss. I think parents are going to be concerned about, where their student is and if they missed, what they missed out on and how to catch up.
Right. So learning loss, diversity, equity, inclusion, critical race theory. What else? These are not small topics.
Well, as much as COVID has been, of course, a part of our life now for quite a while, it's really, I don't know if it's going anywhere. I mean, it might shift, and we've learned a lot through this process, but we also have to take a step back and kind of look at it from a different lens. And maybe some of the things that were put in place, whether there's COVID or not, we have to maybe look at some protocols might still continue to work, not including masks, of course, but other things you just never know. It's just now we've had this experience. And it's not either, pre-COVID, post-COVID. It's kind of like, well, this is just a continuum that we might have learned some new things that maybe we should think about.
Yeah, it is not over. We hope that at best we'll be able to think about it operationally and technically, and not have it consume what happens for the rest of the new school year. But it's certainly not gone. One more. As if this weren't enough. right?
I'd like to add one. I think in the coming day, and excuse me for not being on
That's
the Google. My internet dropped again. I'm going to put a plug in. I hate Comcast, but other than that. So one of the things that I thought that, is going to be a topic for discussion that I would need to learn more about is I think the whole potential redistricting we're going to need to discuss. We have a lot of new housing developments coming. We're anticipating a lot of new students, and that might cause us to need to, shift students or teachers between different school buildings. But the best way to handle that is both for getting support and buy-in from the community, as well as teachers who might be displaced from one building to another. And I think that's something that I would benefit from learning more about how to maybe approach that in different ways.
Thank you. And I know that's been on the horizon for Reddington Township for years as you've watched development and growth and building. There's nothing like redistricting as a lightning rod in any community. It's a very emotional topic. Looks good on paper, and it's a very emotional topic for families and kids and faculty. So yes, plates are full. They're full everywhere. The reason I asked you to surface those is because you will, in the next weeks, have to be thinking about approach and processes. And before you think about results and answers, I'm going to really, really ask you to consider what's our approach and what are our processes, right? To strengthen our results, to strengthen our decisions. It's almost human nature sometimes to want to jump to the what's the answer, right? What have we decided? Let's just do this. Let's make a decision. Let's roll something out. The methodical, when you have the time, when it's important but not urgent, to think about as a board, how will we learn together around this topic? What are the key questions to make us a learning board before we go into a decision-making board? So Sengi says, if you're a learning organization, you are building capacity, you're continually learning. You are expanding your patterns. So as a board, you're expanding your patterns of how you think and act as a board. It's like deepening your repertoire. And you're helping people with their aspirations, not in every one of the topics you've mentioned, but for the most part, as a learning organization, to what do you aspire? And your strategic plan does that. It helps people aspire to a greater level. And you, of course, are seeing the whole. As a board together, you're seeing everyone, not just the loudest or the squeakiest or the most determined person in front of you or the person who spoke to you last, but you're stepping back all of the time to take in the whole for the children, right? The mission, the core, the children. So Heifetz calls it like looking from the balcony. He says, if you're a leader, you need to get up on that balcony and look at the whole dance floor and see how people are moving and see what's happening all at one time, not just on the dance floor where you can see the people only closest to you. So as we think about that together, the word trust was mentioned earlier, and I just want to think about a few words that you've heard maybe too often in the last 18 months, especially. Nothing happens without trust, right? So you do a lot to earn each other's trust, and you do a lot to earn the community's trust. And that doesn't come just by being elected, right? By being elected, people have hope in you, right? They believe they're electing a great thinker, a great leader. And then they switch to trust because you've taken an oath. And that trust is earned, right? A decision at a time. It doesn't disappear when we misstep, right? Especially if we're vulnerable enough to be able to say, we misstepped, we've rethought, we're ready to retrack, we're ready to tackle this again in a new way. That takes a little courage and bravery, and not everyone's willing to say it, but the best leaders do. That trust is earned. It's earned, over time. And there can be cracks. You and your peers on the board, you can have moments where you're not sure about that trust or where there has been a slight breach. Bouncing back from that is the important piece. So it's not absolute all the time, but you're always working toward that community trust. And that trust comes with keeping their children at the core of all of your decisions. Are you student-centered? And can you test your decisions by asking yourselves, are we student-centered? That's our charge here, right? Have we done the right thing by our kids? The word you might already be tired of, though, is transparency. I think almost every leader in every capacity in the last 18 months might be tired of the word transparency. So I think it's important that we understand what we mean when we use the word. So just right off the top of your heads, when you hear the word transparency, or when you ask someone else, to be transparent, what do you mean? What do you want? Or what do you think others want when they ask the board to be transparent?
I think they don't want to be blindsided. I think they want to know what the discussions are, how we get to the decisions when something ultimately is on the agenda. We conduct our committee meetings, and a lot of the discussion is there. Over the years, we've beefed up our committee meetings. Obviously, you can't contain all of the discussions, but we try our best to communicate. We do the publications to the newspaper to let them know things are going on in the district. So I think they want to know how we got to where we are, and it's especially important with staff too. If there's changes that are going to be affecting them, I think it's very important that they are either part of the process. I mean, the golden rule is if you want your staff to do something, you need to have their buy-in, which means they need to be part of the solution. They need to be part of it from the beginning.
So 3 really important things that Laura contributed here. The last being from the beginning, right? You can't ask people for buy-in when something's being delivered, right? So it's that inclusivity of voice and engagement, and having a good idea of what you mean by engagement, right? Engagement, you're going to listen to. Engagement, you're going to be informed. Engagement, we want your voice, but you're not going to make the decision, right? Engagement, we want your voice and you're going to be part of the decision, right? All different levels. Laura also mentioned, not being blindsided. So, it's one of the first things board members ask of a superintendent. We don't want to be blindsided, right? The faculty of its principal, we don't want to be blindsided, and vice versa. Right? So again, you can't disclose everything at every stage, but certainly when I think of transparency, I think of a narrative, right? So just hold that thought about a narrative for a moment. The third thing Laura mentioned was internal and external, how we get to a decision, not just this is the decision we've made, but the process and rationale behind it, right? Every little detail, no. Broad stroke, there was a process. This is what we used. This is how we approached it. Yes, rationale, process, and approach go a long way toward that. Please be transparent. What else do you think of when you hear the word transparent after you cringe? What else do you think of? If if you want transparency in an organization to which you belong, what are you asking for?
I think Laura pretty much said it all, but I would just add, like, you'd want facts, like real data driven kind of information, and not sort of, opinions and that stuff.
Great. So facts and some database, right? Well, we need to have a cornerstone, something to which we can tether our decision making, right? And that might be research, it might be data, but it's more than just we think, right? It's more than just we know the community, right? We believe we know what people want. So as you think about this, it comes down to those skills of communication. And, in real estate, you talk about location, location, location. And in boardsmanship and leadership, it's communication, communication, communication. And I have watched over the last years as you as a board and certainly your administration has devoted focused time and energy to being better and better and better at communication. I've read newsletters. I've been on your website from time to time. I've watched how you've responded to school opening, closing, hybrid. We know that the number one criticism of any relationship, of any partnership, and of any organization is communication. Not enough, too much, comes at the wrong time, wasn't clear, right? And so I would say to you that that is like the endless journey, working hard on great communication. And my tip for you is to think of everything as a narrative. So at a public board meeting like this evening, if I take the superintendent contract as an example, Laura shared a narrative. There was the legal requirement, right? There was the board assessment. There was a little celebration, and there was action. But she shared the arc of a process. People are hardwired for a story from birth, right? From birth. And so I've watched many a board go through motions and vote on things that were probably good for the organization, but they weren't able to come out of that vacuum and share the narrative, share the narration, why we're addressing this, the process we went through to get here, our hopes for what will happen after this vote, right? Or something that needs to be celebrated, or something that is really a concern that you need to speak about in hard ways, right? That you're grappling with. People are hardwired for that story. They want to know a beginning, middle, and end, and they want to know how, right? Not like the why, the what, the how we got there. So you can make the best decisions. Always be asking yourselves, how are we communicating those decisions so that people have an appreciation, and I don't mean like gratitude, but an understanding of the work that we've done to get to this point so far, right? How are we controlling the narrative? So you can look back over the last 18 months, as every one of us can, and think, if we had that exact scenario again, we might communicate differently. And just take it forward as you begin to think about the issues that you brought to the table, knowing that you will face possibly redistricting, issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion, issues around masks, right? Big issues. They all matter, right? They all matter. Not equally, perhaps, but they all matter. So how will you use the information, the data, tell the story, right? And be clear about it. And have a common story, right? You don't start out at the same place as 10 people thinking about an issue, but when there's a decision to move forward on a path, everybody needs to be able to tell the common story, right? This is how we're moving forward together on this path for now. We might reconsider down the road, but for now, this is our path. So just a few more things. Some things are non-negotiable. And for those of you, Eric and Laura, who have been on the board for quite a while now, Tom in and out, right? We want to think about what's non-negotiable. And working as a team of 10, not working behind the scenes in pockets or private conversations that are divisive in any way, but trying hard from committees to the team of 10. Understanding that you have absolutely no power away from the board table. And that's something that School Boards Association kind of drills into people right away, right? Your power exists at the board table. It's really hard, since you've not been able to meet much in person, to understand the limits of your email and not get in trouble with legal discussions and know those boundaries. But I know that your attorney works hard to keep you straight on those as well. No promises, right, to anyone. You can't keep them, so don't put yourselves out on a limb. I think, gosh, more than ever, we're under pressure, each and every one of us, to understand that when we become school board members, it is nonpartisan. Pure and simple. It's about children. It is a nonpartisan role. You're not on council, right? You're not in the assembly. This is a nonpartisan role. And while there might be some politics in campaigning, there can be no politics in governance. And that's hard at points of pressure, especially if people are pressuring you. So might be politics in campaigning, but once elected, once you've taken that oath, it is about governance versus politics. And the two other pieces are acting for the greater good and for every child. And there are hard challenges as well. It's hard to pause sometimes and think not just who's at the table, but who was not represented in this discussion. And I think more and more as board members, we're better board members and we're better leaders when we're specifically asking the question of, was anyone left out, right? Was anyone left out of this decision, of this discussion, of how we move forward? This is good for the gifted and talented child. Does it impact other children? This is good for the middle school. How does it impact the elementary schools? Right? Who was not part of the discussion, and from whom did we not hear, who might not always be in front of us? So the last piece for this evening is this great acronym that I love to use, because I love to have people think about it in terms of get a grip, right? Just like that kind of colloquialism of like, just get a grip. Well, sometimes when we find ourselves in sticky places, I have a friend who will say, there are sticky problems and there are wicked problems. And sometimes we find ourselves facing both because we don't follow this acronym of GRIP. So G is goal. Do you know the goal? Are we really crisp and clear about what we're trying to accomplish? Can we name it? Can we name the goal? Now, whether that's huge, like your strategic goal, or whether that's the goal of reopening schools, right? Or the goal of developing a policy, are we crisp about the goal? A lot of times people end up in a messy process because the goal is unclear from the beginning. The R in GRIP is, does everybody know their roles? And, that goes for board members. administrators, members of the public, members of the teaching staff, right? Do we know our roles? Not just the role given to us by regulation and school code, but do we really understand what's my role in this decision and how far does it go? What are the boundaries that I have? Because everybody has boundaries, right? Some people don't love them. Some people want to cross them all the time, but everyone has boundaries on the roles that they play in a discussion or in a decision-making process. The I in interactions is how we interact with one another. You know, do we understand? Are we interacting via email, right? Are we interacting in subgroups? Are we interacting in public, right? With recorded sessions? How are our interactions defined? And certainly, they're defined by professionalism, right? They're defined by the expectation that everyone has good intentions and is not there for malice. They're defined by respect, even if we disagree. I love to say we can disagree without being disagreeable. Hard to keep in mind sometimes, but it's a really, really good piece to follow, a norm to follow when you think about your interactions. And the last is, do we have a process in place? You know, we've all been part of too many discussions or too many attempts to come to a decision where people did not think up front about the process to follow, got in the middle where it got muddy and ugly, and then had to institute or implement processes. So every so often, you know, in the next years, you might think to yourself, get a grip, or you might actually say to others in a committee meeting or a board meeting, like, let's think for a minute. Like, you know, do we understand the goal? Do we know our roles in this? Do we know how Jason's role is different than our role? Jonathan's role is different than our role. The Teachers Association role is different than the board or the management. And can we describe the processes that we will use? When people can follow that little acronym, they can tell the story. They can narrate their leadership and where the district is headed. And they can do it with transparency. Right? All tying together, they can do it with transparency. So I think that as you go through the next weeks before we are even together again, there will be a couple of these major topics that you will have to grapple with. And the pieces that I've shared this evening and asked you to reflect upon and think about will strengthen and enhance the work that you will do in the next months if you just go back and reflect on them a little bit. What's the narrative look like? Do we know the goal? Can we describe the processes? Are we fully acting upon the role that we have and not crossing lanes into somebody else's role? And is it for the good of all? You are in a place, and we are in a place in this state and in our nation where leadership is perhaps a little more difficult, and there are many challenges. You can act for the good of all only in your circle of influence. So the last piece I'd like to share is that your circle of influence is probably deeper and broader than you realize. You have tremendous authority and power to shape good for your community and for your kids. So think about that power of influence. When you can influence and not have to use authority, it's a beautiful thing, right? When influence is your power and you don't have to say, because we can, because we did, it's a great piece of leadership for your community. So these topics are going to be before you, even before we're back together. And when we are back together, we're going to use some of these principles to actually forge pathways for you to work on these topics in the months ahead. You have a lot of resources. I've given you more resources than you'll ever need in the years that you'll serve as a board member. You might want to start to take a look at a couple of them. But my one request for you, my one little homework assignment is 5 minutes, just 5 minutes of your quiet time tonight or tomorrow to think about these pieces that I've shared and how they might strengthen you as a board member and how they might strengthen you as a full board. Just that quiet reflection, because I'm going to ask you about that the next time we're together. So any member of the board or Jonathan, we will be much more interactive the next time, but anything you want to scream at me right now or anything that you want to say like, this is something I am going to give more thought to.
Judy, I just want to say thank you for this introduction and for some of your thoughts. I'll just say that I have a couple of takeaways that I highlighted. When you talked about Sange's work, before we have reactions, it will take learning is one key takeaway. I like how you talked about how we're hardwired for a story, right? Like maybe I have to get a little bit better at telling the story to not only the board, but even to the public. And then how, at the end of the day, if you can, if influence is your power, that's true leadership, right? So I think that those are the things that I'm going to think about. And I think that number one on my list is really to think about that narrative that you talked about, how people are hardwired for a story. And we can tell our story. That's half the battle. Probably more than half the battle. So I want to thank you for some of those.
I knew you had nothing else to think about either, Jonathan, so I'm glad you have something else.
Nothing else. Nothing else to think, right? Yeah. So thanks, Judy. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. So I'll ask that each of you think about your takeaways, right? Because getting elected and being a person of goodwill who will serve the Reddington Township community is critical, but then you want to be the best that you can be, right? Each of you is there to be the very best leader you can be. Right. I see hungry, tired faces, and I really understand that and appreciate it. So I'm grateful to be with you. I hope I have piqued your interest in some of the learnings of great boardmanship, and that we can interact a lot more the next time that we're together. Thanks, and be well. More than anything, be well.
Thank you so much, Judy. It was great to see you.
Good to see you too. Take good care.
All right, take care. So I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Tom.
Second, Beth.
All right, can I get a roll call, please? Oh, there he is. Okay.
Dr. Socio,
Here, I'm sorry, that was at the beginning. Yes.
Mr. Emmons,
Yes.
Mrs. Fiore,
Yes.
Mrs. Podgorski,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
and Mrs. Simon.
Yes. That's all, folks.
Thank you, everybody. Have
Have
a great night.
night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
The second.